Hi, I'm Christopher Warnock of Renaissance Astrology, and this is an introduction to planetary rulership in traditional astrology. So I did a previous video, and we're talking about houses, and I was talking about how the changing social conditions had changed the how you do as house assignments, which I thought was really interesting. I decided I would do that with planetary rulerships with some various topics, and then I realized, you know what, I need to back up. I need to do a video. This won't be super long, but I need to do a video that gives an introduction to planetary rulership. So, basically, just in a nutshell, planetary rulership, all of the seven traditional planets, they rule material things, people, relationships, concepts, things like that. Pretty much anything that exists in the material world, but even concepts and relationships and things like that, have a planetary rulership. Now, here's the problem. Everybody wants to argue about which one planet universally objective for all time rules each specific thing. Okay, so it's like this very black and white. There's anything you point to only has one ruler, and there's only one right one, and we're going to argue about which one it is. Okay, so the problem with that is that it really doesn't get to the root of what planetary rulership really is, and then it's a much more sophisticated system than that. And then, what we're dealing with is this situation where, I think it's, I don't know if maybe they did this in the Middle Ages as well, Renaissance, but in the modern period, there's this desire to label things. It's very academic, sort of a little trick. When you label it, you stick it in a box, you categorize it, and then you've got it all organized and controlled, and then you have this illusion of understanding it. So as soon as I stick a label on it, then I know what it is. Animism. Okay, that's what that is. And the lived reality of what it is lost. Okay, and it's a living, part of this organic whole, and the complexity of things gets reduced down to the simplistic label. So here's the key insight about planetary rulership. Okay, is that all material things and people and anything with planetary rulership is ruled by all seven planets in different quantities. Okay, everything you can think of, and in material objects, for example, have all seven planets rule them. Okay, but in different levels. Now let's get an example. Agrippa, 3 books of occult philosophy. This is written in the mid 1500s, so the mid 16th century. So let's use an example. This is book 1, chapter 30, but say an apple tree. Let's use that example. So Agrippa, he says, everything that bears fruit is from Jupiter. Everything that bears flowers is from Venus. All seed and bark is from Mercury. All roots from Saturn, and all wood from Mars, and leaves from the moon. Okay? So like I said, you got this apple tree, and every bit of it, depending on which piece you're going to look at, is ruled by a different planet. And again, if you want to get deep into the roots, you could differentiate the parts of the roots and things like that. So the qualities that we associate with the planets are then replicated in material objects. And so when we talk about rulership, what we're doing is we're separating out some specific qualities or things about that object, and we're focusing on them as what's important, and then we're finding the planet or planets that are associated with that. So you're going to have multiple planetary rulerships of everything. So anyone that comes in and says X is ruled by Y is not understanding what planetary rulership it is. What they're not understanding is that you're focusing on specific qualities, and then you're looking at the planet or planets that go with that quality. So for example, gold. Gold is ruled by the sun because its color. Okay, this color is that's what it relates to with the sun's color. For Jupiter because it's so valuable, and then Saturn because it's so heavy. Okay. Another one, for example, that comes up a lot is say magic and astrology. Okay, what's the planetary rulership of magic and astrology? It's Saturn and Mercury. Okay, both of those are associated with Mercury. Law, that's another one. Which planets are associated with law? Okay, Jupiter, justice, right? That's like a good judge, a legislator that's doing for everyone's benefit. Saturn is really the deep patterning of law, but it's also power. Okay, and then Mercury is more like sort of like cleverness, which can manifest in a positive way. So intelligence, figuring out the legal rules, figuring out categorizing everything. Also in a sneaky way, devious, some slick lawyers trying to get around everything. That's Mercury as well. So you can see how complex it is because one thing, law, has multiple qualities and therefore has multiple planets associated with it, but that's true of everything, okay? So what is rulership? What are we talking about when we say rulership? Is this some sort of conventional made up thing and just like sticking, again, labels on it? This is like that and there's no real connection? Again, the medieval Renaissance view is that there is an incredibly close connection between the planetary rulership and the planet, that the planet is in the thing, right? So one way to look at it is this view of what's called occult virtue. Okay, occult virtue, again, it has to be translated into modern sort of language. Occult virtue, occult doesn't mean, witchcraft or something. It just means hidden. And virtue doesn't have anything to do with ethics or morals. It just means powers. So occult virtue means hidden powers. So as opposed to the elemental powers, air, earth, fire, and water, which are combinations of hot and dry, wet, and cold, those are the elementals. These are occult virtues, things that you can't just tell from the elemental qualities. It's hidden. So if we trace back the ultimate origin of occult virtue, everything is unified and perfect in the one. Okay, and then in a sense, you could say it spreads or is differentiated, but it's still perfect in the divine mind, and it appears in the divine mind as archetypes, as Platonic ideas and archangels. These are all, in a sense, interchangeable depending on how you're thinking about them. It then appears in the soul of the world, the anima mundi, as seminal ideas. So seminal idea, it's like a seed. Okay, if you think of a seed of something, I'm about to plant flower seeds. That little tiny seed contains everything necessary to turn into the flower. So if you think of an idea, it has everything necessary to fully manifest, whatever it is. The seed idea of, of a city, it's got all the necessary interconnections and everything that's there to become a city, or whatever you want to talk about, ants, anything you can think of. Then from the anima mundi, the occult virtue, one of the key sort of areas of manifestation, also ways we can interface with occult virtue, are in the celestials. So in other words, in the fixed stars and planets. So these various streams, these various interconnections of occult virtue are shared among the fixed stars and planets. They then appear as mathematical ratios, as images and sigils, and then in the most imperfect state, in material things. So the most imperfect manifestation you can get of an occult virtue is in a material object. Okay? And so as opposed to modern, where the material is the measure of all things, it's the highest manifestation of anything, it's the only thing that's really real is material. It's the flip side in the medieval Renaissance view, which is the material is the most imperfect and the spiritual is the highest and most perfect. And then within the spiritual, like I said, we have this whole chain of being, showing how the diffusion of occult virtue. So what I think is really important to think about with this is that if we continue to think about reality as being all these separate things, we're not understanding it. And occult virtue shows this intermediate level of between total diverse, infinite, everything separate and everything being one. Okay, this is the intermediate zone here of the interconnection of things, so that there's a level of perfection, but there's also a level of differentiation, and there's also a level of unity there. So each individual thing that is a manifestation of a mix of occult virtues of planetary rulership. And we're doing this classification at sort of the celestial level. And you can think of something like justice that appears in the archetypal realm, that whole view of justice as the woman with the scales and the sword, and the scales are for those very fine distinctions that are necessary for finding justice, and the sword is for the punishment, this necessary part of justice. So this is the archetypal image of it, and this is how it appears in the divine mind. It appears in the celestial realm basically as Jupiter. I would say justice is it's most strongly through Jupiter, and then appears in the material world through the just people and acts of justice. So all these things are not separate. They are one unified thing. All justice, however you're going to look at the manifestations of it, whether in the, as I said, as an archetype, in the anima mundi, in the celestials, as Jupiter, or in the material world, or in the intermediate, like I said, sigils and signs, images of justice. These are all connected. Everything is unified. And we can trace these unification and sympathy of all things That is really what the job of the mage is. That's how magic is done. So again, the celestials and planetary rulerships are um, throughout everything. Everything is connected, and then everything is sort of an individual manifestation of mix, so to speak. It's like it's unique in only in the fact that it's a mixture, a unique mixture of things. But a lot of times, again, unique like a snowflake. I mean, there's a similarity among snowflakes. I mean, they all kind of look the same in a lot of ways, even though they're unique. So what the planetary rulership really is an expression of this incredible unity of all things. And so another way to think about it, if you think of sunlight, sunlight is the sun. It's really not separate from the sun. And if you look, for example, you look at at the sunlight reflecting in a stream, you can see millions of suns. They're all there. Things that are ruled by the suns are also the sun. So nothing is ever really separate. Everything really is connected. So again, when we're looking at planetary rulership, what we're doing is we're taking out and we're looking at these particular qualities. And so, for example, with the rose, we're going to generally say a rose is ruled by Venus, but that's because we're focusing on the sweet smell and the beautiful flowers. But again, the thorns are ruled by Mars, the ruled by Saturn, the leaves by the moon, et cetera, et cetera. So again, every time what we're doing is we're focusing and we're putting that label on it because we're looking at the specific qualities that we consider to be important about that. So what that leads to is the fact that there's lots of variation in rulerships in our traditional sources. So the automatic response to that is, which one's right? It's like, none of them are right. None of them are wrong. Basically, like I said, none of them is 100% right. They're looking at different qualities. They have a different approach to it. And so it doesn't mean everything's right, though, either. You can't just make stuff up. I mean, Saturn doesn't rule love. This is like none of your traditional sources are going to follow that along. It's just not. You're not kind of getting the beat there. You're not kind of getting the rhythm if you're out of it like that. There are got a lot of give and a lot of differentiations in it. Now, I want to give an example of that. I've provided links on this page to 3 different sources on my website on planetary rulership. We have Lilly and his Christian Astrology from 1647, Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy from 1530, and then Al-Biruni from about 1000 AD. I tend to go with Lilly, also Picatrix. This is sort of fits my sensibility. But take a look at those sources. You can see, the differences between them. There's a lot of similarities, a lot of differences. Recognize that it's, like I said, again, there's not one right answer. Try to see the underlying qualities that they're pointing to when they say, a planet rules a particular thing or type of person. So let me just give you an example. And again, this comes from Picatrix. This is book 3, chapter 7. It's a little long, but I'll just walk through it. So what we're doing with the planetary rulerships is also, it gives us a sense of the personality. Let's just say, this is why I like devotional approach and approaching the planets as persons, because they have these personalities and you can kind of get a sense of it. So it says Venus is cold and moist. A fortune signifies cleanliness, splendor, preciousness, word games, delight in music, joy, adornment, laughter, pictures, beauty, loveliness, playing music by the voice or stringed instruments, delighting in marriage, desiring spices and things that have good odors, sending dreams, provoking games of chess and dice, desiring to lie with women and fall in love with them, receiving promises from them, desiring to appear beautiful, loving liberty. She abhors anger, brawling, and vengeance and lawsuits. Is inclined towards cupidity, desires to drink much, incessantly desires much copulation, delights in animals and children, making things equal, delighting in merchants and living with them and being loved by their women, and being delightful to men. So again, you get a sense of this person as, like I said, a little Marilyn Monroe kind of person, It's just like pleasure-loving, exciting, doesn't like to argue, again. And so people sometimes say, oh, Venus rules money. It's like, well, Venus likes to spend money. Venus is not very good at making money. Not very practical, not really a planet we look to for practicality typically. Again, I have a talisman that's for Venus, that's for wealth. It's a very specialized talisman. And so it's not to say that it can appear together, but that's, again, we kind of get a personality, a sense of it. So let's take a Lilly here. Lilly, and these are talking about people. And then from Picatrix, this is the herbs and plants that are ruled by Venus. This is myrtle, always green. Herbs that she governs have a sweet flavor, pleasant smell, white flower, gentle humor. Leaves are smooth and not jagged. She governs the lily, white and yellow, lily of the valley, maidenhair, violet, and the white and yellow daffodil. And then in trees, sweet apples, white rose, the fig, white sycamore, wild ash, olive, sweet oranges, mugwort, lady's mantle, musk, coriander, apricots, plums, and raisins. So again, like I said, you kind of get a sense of the personality of Venus from this. And like I said, there's a tendency to go from, the planet rules X, right? But one of the things you can do is go from X to back to the planet. So you can go both ways. So if you understand Mercury, you understand the things ruled by Mercury to a certain extent. But if you understand the things ruled by the moon, then you understand the moon. So, I mean, a good example of that was my wife and I in Washington, D.C., we had a period where we were taking care of these wild ducks that had nested in our courtyard. So we were kind of helping them out and observing them. And ducks are water birds, and they're ruled by the moon. And so what's very interesting about them was they're not super smart individually, but they work together as a group really well. I mean, they big into social learning. So if one learned how to do something, the others would immediately, learn it quickly. And they love to do stuff together. They're very, very social. And that's interesting because the moon rules common people. And the moon also rules technology, which you think, why is the moon ruling technology? But you can see that knowledge is something that the moon is really good at, that lunar things are very knowledgeable, but they have a specialized way of learning that, which is learning it in groups and as social, and together in a social group. So again, very useful. I think, what I would say about rulerships is it's extremely important to understand that this is a very complex system, that there's not one right and a wrong answer about rulership, and that when we're dealing with it, we're dealing with these specific qualities that we're focusing on, and even those specific qualities can be ruled by different planets. So go ahead and take a look at this, the rulership list. And, I've seen astrology described as being a comprehensive language for description of reality. In order to do that, it has to be very complex, but what that gives us is this incredible tool for understanding things. It's not simplistic. It's not something that's facile. It's not something you can pick up in 15 minutes. It does take a lot of time and it takes a lot of work. And it's not strictly syllogistic either. It's not just like an algorithm. There's a very poetic quality to look to rulership and the understanding of the planets. And again, thinking of those personalities, people, I think is a very effective way of doing that. So I hope you find this interesting. And this is, I said, basically an intro to some further, at least one video that I'm going to do about rulership. But I needed to, like I said, get into what is planetary rulership and what does it entail in a much more sophisticated and a medieval Renaissance style, so you could go ahead and understand it for the other videos, like I said. So I hope you find it interesting and useful, and I hope you'll dive in and take a look at some of those links and start looking at the planetary rulerships and using it as a way to deepen your understanding of both the planets and the things that they rule.